So we start off with a picture that's in the textbook, and the textbook starts off with going, through a discussion about this painting called "The Strike." It's painted in 1886 by artist Robert Kohler, and was inspired by something that, a great railroad strike in 1877. And this is, some could call it a propaganda piece, propaganda in a sense that there's a political message, although, it's not super clear who is being, is he trying to vilify somebody, or is he taking sides politically? I mean, you certainly see this. Well, it's clear an angry kind of mob of workers. And as the textbook points out, these weird hats that look like, maybe you work in a fast food or something, may have actually represented a higher trade, a higher, more skilled labor jobs. And in any case, here we see a picture of someone, looks like he's going to pick up a rock. They're all angry, and you hear it looks to be a girlfriend or a wife, sister, a woman pleading, for there to be some calm. And here we have what appears to be the capitalist, or the representative of the capitalist. He looks very stern, very unmoved, and the man on the side of him looks a little bit more concerned. But this is, I think, a great picture of kind of showing the divide, right, between the wealthy and the people who are working to generate the wealth, as opposed to the people who actually own the means to which the wealth is created. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what's in this chapter here. And so we see we're going to be covering these topics, and I'm actually just going to go right into them. So, sources of the Industrial Revolution. So the question here in the PowerPoint is, how did human migration foster American industrialization? This is something that I think, I have friends who work within business, and it's a very complicated question in the sense of what it means to people politically. But what's clear, what we saw back then, we see in the textbook on page 470, that it wasn't just the raw materials that were essential for all the growth that was happening when you think about an industrial revolution. Because first of all, let's clarify, actually. Let me back up. What do we mean when we say industrial revolution? Think about bread. Before a factory, you might have a stove in which a baker can bake you bread. And now, when you go to some sort of grocery store, if there's some sort of small-scale producer, or if you can go to a bakery where there's very limited amount of goods being produced by a skilled artisan in, bread making or pastries, we love it. Maybe that's always the best tasting, but even if everybody in the town wants those goods, the problem with something like that is that it's limited. I mean, if you have too many people wanting this small-scale production of food, you can make more of it by expanding your business, perhaps losing what was appealing about it in the first place, right? Or you simply charge way more so that only the people who have the most money can get it. Ultimately, not everybody is going to be able to get the bread when you have a small-scale baker who makes bread by hand. You're going to have just way far lower numbers of bread production, period. Then, you have a factory that gets invented. Well, you have, machines that get invented that can produce thousands of slices of bread, as opposed to several hundred in, a week, or how much ever. I'm not an expert on how much bread can be made by a single baker as opposed to a factory, but I think we all know that it's a lot more, right? And so industrialization then is seen as a positive thing. It is something that can give us a lot of goods to much more people, as opposed to the way we had a small scale business. On the other side of this is that there's a lack of personableness to a factory, an industrial center, right? Where you have these large, heartless machines, if you want to, say it this way, almost poetically, and the human is kind of bowing to the demands of keeping the everything going with the machines, and having maybe a foreman or some manager person coming and cracking down on you for, to keep up the pace. Okay, so you're able to produce, but under these very kind of often have been not the best conditions. Okay, and in fact, at this time, industrialization is doing just that. It's producing more goods for people than human history ever saw, but it's also using human beings in kind of almost slave-like conditions that are very abusive. And there weren't all of these labor laws that we have now. And that's something I want to really emphasize, because we're going to go into that. That's something that's going to be a result of workers struggling against these conditions. Now, returning to the question, how did human migration foster American industrialization? The textbook says that cheap labor is what actually helped generate all these profits in which these companies could thrive. And that it says that in the late 19th century, the number of foreign-born to 1 in 5 American workers, or 2 in 5 in manufacturing and mining by 1910. So we saw a lot of increase of foreign workers. And, this is actually why, if you think about it, the whole debate about, I'm just going to kind of go into this right now. We'll talk more about this later. Illegal immigration is good for certain businesses and industries, right? Because actually all immigration has usually been good for business, because immigrants, whether legal or illegal, are often going to get the smallest pay. And so while they're accused of taking the jobs that the people who have been here longer are upset about, most people are not willing to work for the wages that the newcomers are. And illegal immigration, if you think about it, we have a minimum wage right now. Now we do. Well, for a business that doesn't want to have to pay the minimum wage, an illegal immigrant actually bypasses that, and they can maximize their profits. There wouldn't have been all of these, so many illegal immigrants in the United States if there wasn't businesses that wanted to hire them, and from small scales to large. I just want you to think about that for a moment. I'm not trying to get into a debate of what you should think about the whole issue of immigration, being, illegal immigration, but it's always been an asset to business. Okay, and we see this here now. It says the question is, how did government officials defend the practice of making huge land grants to the railroads? So we've looked at immigration, and we looked at the big businesses, and we're seeing how that's playing out. One, the government, even though they were working with private business owners, the railroads were seen as a benefit to everybody. That there was a state interest in it. And the textbook kind of compares things like the highways, or roads to be built, and the internet later on. Technology. If you think about it now, the issues that even now that Apple is facing with the FBI, and whether or not that they need to make a product that can do things that the government wants as opposed to them. Whether it's being opposed or for, there's certain types of business industries that end up being very closely in the proximity of the state, much more so. Okay, right? So candy, for example, the state may not see like any kind of like nationalist interest and what's going on in the candy industry. But obviously something like roads or the access of getting goods from one part of the country to the other would be something in their benefit. Now, on the other side of that, though, while the government was intervening and helping private business, they were also backing off. And what does that mean? We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next lecture.